Every single country you can think of is in debt. The United States owes trillions. Japan owes even more compared to the size of its economy. Developing countries owe billions, while even some of the world's richest nations continue borrowing every year. It sounds impossible. After all, if every country is in debt, who is everyone borrowing from? Even stranger, despite owing enormous amounts of money, many countries don't seem to be rushing to pay it back. Instead, they keep borrowing even more. If an ordinary person did that, they would probably go bankrupt. So why do governments play by completely different rules? Is the global economy secretly built on debt? And what would happen if every country suddenly decided to pay back everything it owed? The answer is far more surprising than most people realize. When most people hear the word debt, they imagine unpaid bills, loans, or credit cards. For individuals, debt is usually something to avoid because failing to repay it can destroy your finances. But for governments, debt works very differently. Every country has expenses. Governments build highways, schools, hospitals, airports, power stations, and military equipment. They also pay teachers, doctors, police officers, firefighters, and millions of other public workers. On top of that, they fund pensions, disaster relief, scientific research, and countless public services that keep society functioning every day. All of this costs an enormous amount of money. Governments earn money mainly through taxes. Every time you buy something, earn a salary, own a property, or run a business, a portion of that money usually goes to the government. But taxes don't always cover everything a country wants or needs to spend. Sometimes a country faces a recession. Businesses earn less, people lose jobs, and tax revenue falls. Other times, governments want to invest heavily in infrastructure because they believe these projects will strengthen the economy for decades. Wars, pandemics, natural disasters, and financial crises can also force governments to spend far more than they collect. When that happens, they have two options. They can either dramatically raise taxes, which is usually unpopular and can slow economic activity, or they can borrow money. Most choose to borrow, and that's where national debt begins. At first, borrowing sounds irresponsible, but imagine you're buying a house. Very few people save enough money to pay for it in cash. Instead, they take out a mortgage because the house provides value for many years while they repay the loan gradually. Governments often think in a similar way. Suppose a country borrows billions of dollars to build modern ports, faster railways, faster and better internet infrastructure, or cleaner power plants. If those investments help businesses grow, create jobs, and increase future tax revenue, the economy may expand enough to make the borrowing worthwhile. In other words, debt can be used as a tool to create future growth. Economists often compare it to taking out a business loan. Borrowing isn't automatically a problem. The real question is whether the money is being used wisely. But this raises an even bigger question. If every country keeps borrowing money, who is actually lending it? This is where things become really interesting. When people hear that a government has borrowed trillions of dollars, they often imagine another country handing over a grand pile of cash. While governments do sometimes borrow from other governments, that's only a small part of the story. In reality, most countries borrow money by selling something called government bonds. Think of a government bond as an IOU. The government promises lend us money today and will pay you back later with interest. But who buys these bonds? The answer is almost everyone. Banks buy them because they are considered one of the safest investments available. Pension funds buy them to help pay future retirees. Insurance companies invest in them to protect their customers' money. Investment funds purchase them for millions of ordinary investors. Even individuals can buy government bonds in many countries. And yes, foreign governments also buy them. For example, one country may hold bonds issued by another because they are seen as stable investments. This means that when people say a country owes another nation, it's often because that nation or its institutions owns some of its government bonds. Now here's the part that confuses many people. If governments know they owe money, why don't they simply pay it all back? The answer is surprisingly simple. Imagine a country collects $1 trillion in taxes this year. At the same time, it needs to spend more on healthcare, education, defense, infrastructure, pensions, and interest on existing debt. If it uses all of its tax revenue to repay old loans, it may not have enough money left to run essential public services. Instead, many governments repay maturing bonds by issuing new bonds. Investors buy the new bonds and that money is used to pay back the old ones. This process is called rolling over debt, and it's something governments, like many governments all over the world, have done for decades. As long as investors believe the country is financially stable and capable of making its interest payments, they are usually willing to keep lending. So why doesn't every country simply borrow unlimited amounts forever? What stops governments from printing endless bonds, borrowing without limits, and spending as much as they want? The answer is in one thing every financial system depends on: trust. And once that trust disappears, even the world's biggest economies can face enormous consequences. Money moves because people believe it will be paid back. The same is for governments. As long as investors trust that a country can repay its debts, they continue buying its bonds. But if that confidence begins to fade, everything can change very quickly. Investors may demand much higher interest rates to compensate for the increased risk. That means the government must spend even more money just to borrow. In extreme cases, investors may stop lending altogether. When that happens, governments are forced into difficult decisions. They might cut public spending, raise taxes, reduce government services, or seek emergency financial assistance. These measures can slow economic growth and place enormous pressure on ordinary citizens.